I want to talk about the due process of law real quick here. Mentioned in article or the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. So, and also a little bit about privileges and immunities. So, first off, the Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law, right? So I got to thinking about that. I'm like, okay, can this be, so say for example, had Barron v. Baltimore been decided correctly, because I've already made the claim that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and the consent of the governed can only be given to that which is written down and presented for ratification. If it's not written down and presented for ratification and then receives the ratification, if that doesn't happen, then they did not get their consent for it. Now, governments, do they have unjust powers too then? Yes, I would say that's an obvious concept. An obvious concept is that governments typically have both just and unjust powers. In other words, usurped powers, right? Period. That's all there is to it. I can't think of a single government in history that hasn't usurped something that they weren't supposed to usurp. So, is that just cause to say the Constitution is dead, the United States has failed, and what have you? No, it's a way of saying basically the United States is sinners. Fortunately, I've never sinned in my life, so we're good to go to hold it all against him unconditionally. I'm just kidding. Yes, all of us mess up, okay? So the United States unavoidably exercises powers not granted to it. It's unacceptable, and we should not tolerate it. But in the meantime, to out and out rebel against the government would be imprudent, using language from the Declaration of Independence. But so I got to thinking to myself, I'm like, wait a second. So could we have used this had Barron v. Baltimore been decided correctly? Because the consent of the governed was given to a version of the Fifth Amendment, which sounds like a blanket prohibition. That's literally it. As far as the saints were concerned, when they were reading the Fifth Amendment, they would have seen it as though, doesn't matter if you're the state, federal government, what have you, Fifth Amendment doesn't clarify. It just says, period, this shall not happen in the United States, period, right? Doesn't matter if it's a municipality, a state, what have you. That's what the consent of the governed was given to, period. And no one flipped out over the wording of it. And it's besides the point. You can talk about the history behind it and everything like that. Can you talk to literally every last voter that was involved in the process and make sure that you know for sure what they all thought they understood? If you cannot, and why in the heck would we do that anyhow? Write it down or nothing, dudes. The consent of the governed can only be given to that which is written down and presented for ratification. So, okay, moving on here. I thought, yeah, maybe we could have used that as a justification to end slavery without any complications. Unfortunately, it also occurred to me almost immediately that slaves were being kept because of a due process of law. In other words, there were laws in the states, and the federal government was granted no jurisdiction whatsoever over this issue. So the laws of the states, this was as Madison says, powers given to the federal government were few and enumerated. The powers granted to the states were many. The states were allowed to make laws regarding these issues and the ownership of the slaves. People, let's go ahead and I kind of feel bad when I keep just saying slaves. I need to say people who were enslaved, right? People who had their whole life's sovereignty usurped, basically. But anyhow, the due process of law, there was literally legislation allowing it to happen. And yes, the whole thing was happening according to a due process of law, unfortunately, which stinks. And I love Joseph Smith's ideas. His ideas he had for ending slavery were the best in the whole wide world, bar none, period. Okay, regarding the saints in Missouri with the extermination order. First off, that was an executive order. That's not the due process of law. Okay? Second off, Article 4, Section 4, someone might say, well, the federal government can only do something when the states apply for it. That's not the way I read Article 4, Section 4. Article 4, Section 4 is a guarantee. A guarantee is a backup plan. It's not a primary plan. It's a backup plan, you guys. Right? Guarantee and warranty are pretty much the exact same word in a lot of languages, okay? So, if the product fails, we've got your back, kind of thing, okay? So, in other words, the first thing is Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1, the Privileges and Immunities Clause. anyone from any state was allowed, should have reasonably expected, I can travel from this state to this state, stay here, live here, whatever, and nobody can like suddenly hold that against me. Okay? No one can suddenly like treat me inferior to the rest of the residents of the state. Okay? And that's literally the way the Constitution read. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 allowed for the Congress to call forth the militia if the laws of the Union were being violated, which when you look at Article 6, Clause 2, it tells you the supreme law of the land is the Constitution, then the laws, and then the treaties. You might be, well, no, it only meant like the stuff legislated. Well, okay, so Article 1, Section 1 says all legislative powers belong to Congress. Let's look at what's listed in Article 6, Clause 2. Does the Constitution go through a legislative process? Yes. Article 5, anything that's added to it goes through literally the federal legislature, then the state legislatures. Yeah, that's legislated. You can look at the laws, you can look at the treaties, all of it. Treaties go through Senate. It's all legislated. So this is all part of the supreme law. So Congress could have, again, Article 4, Section 4 is the backup plan. It's not the primary plan. That's literally warranty or guarantee means, okay? It's not the primary plan. It's not that complicated. Especially, they probably would have understood that better in the old days than we do nowadays. That's a Latin-based word. I have no doubt they understood that better. Okay? But anyhow, so also the president has the take care clause, right? To take care that the laws of the land are faithfully executed. So if the Constitution promises in Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1, this or that, and a state is denying it to a group of people passing through it from another state, you don't have to wait for application of the legislature or the governor. If that group of people says, hey, our privileges and immunities are being denied, Mr. President, he took an oath. He literally took an oath to the Constitution, and it has that take care clause. It's a non-optional one. It's a he shall. Okay, we're not talking about some specific procedure required. As long as he can get this many votes or anything like that, it's he shall take care, period. Get the job done, right? Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1, then, if the case has to be brought before the courts, the judicial power applies to the Constitution, the laws, and the treaty, or in other words, what we call, again, the supreme law of the land, both in law and equity. In other words, where there's no specific procedures written out through an Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 process, you have cases in equity, period. You just do, right? So the constitutional promises have that backup plan for what we call cases in equity, okay? So this could have helped the saints stick around, which the saints could have helped vote for slavery to come to an end anyhow, right? That would have been awesome. That would have been very nice. But anyhow, they got ran out of Missouri, they got ran out of New York, Illinois, etc. And I guess what I'm getting to again is the due process of law. There was a due process of law. Unfortunately, it was allowing people to stay enslaved. There wasn't a due process of law that was allowing for John Barron to be deprived of his land without just compensation. There was no due process that allowed for the saints to be ran out. And so, yeah, anyhow, that's what I want to talk about, just the due process concept. I will be getting into soon here, speaking of the Mormons and the slaves, or the pioneers and the slaves, or the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, however you want to say it. I will be getting into soon here the concept of the twin barbarisms, or the twin relics of barbarism, as Abraham Lincoln called it. There's a whole psychology behind a person who's willing to call another person a barbarian and to consider themselves more enlightened. And there's a way deeper history than just Lincoln, the slave owners, etc. We can get into that another time. Even into Africa itself, one tribe seeing themselves and another tribe as a barbarian versus the other tribe is this, etc. So we'll get into that another time. And I will sit down and go over what I got from Nephi's vision real soon here. Again, the Ezra Taft Benson principles that he taught. That's basically eternal law regarding what God considers acceptable practices of government. So we're not talking about the constitutional principles. we're talking about eternal principles, and they're fantastic. I really need to share those soon, because then that'll teach us about the great and abominable church of the devil, and it'll also teach us a little bit more leading up to the fundamental law of science. So, all right, thanks for listening, guys. See ya.